Hey guys, Quiv the Lazy Geek here and welcome back to the channel. After a night or several nights of imaging, one thing that we're all looking forward to is stacking our light frames after calibrating them. And by stacking, it's just we take all of our light frames and there's our software that will align the stars between the frames, average them out, and then boop, we get the final image and it's magnificent. And there's tons of stacking software like Deep Sky Stacker, that's free, Sequator, I guess, for Mac, I think. There's also Cyril that has a great stacking module. And of course, there is PixInsight with the well-renowned weighted batch pre-processing. And when I say renowned, I mean famous, and to some extent, infamous. Because weighted batch pre-processing is known to take a lot of time to do the stacking, and in this video I want to give you one tip to avoid it taking such a long time, but also I want to have a look at the new batch pre-processing that is available in PixInsight called fast batch pre-processing. And I want to see whether it makes sense to use fast batch pre-processing instead of weighted batch pre-processing. How much time do I gain and how much of a quality difference is there between the images? And then we can decide, is it worth it? By the way, this video is sponsored by Brilliant.org, more later in the video. So first, what is weighted batch pre-processing versus fast batch pre-processing? As the name would imply, weighted batch pre-processing involves weightings and weights, how much each frame will be taken into account relative to the other frames in your stack. And to do so, what the weighted batch pre-processing does is that it will look at each individual frame in your stack and it will assign it a score based on an algorithm. So if you have frames that are affected by wind, that don't have the best looking stars, that have light pollution, that are taken lower near the horizon, so they're more affected by atmosphere, seeing, and light pollution, that kind of stuff, the weighted batch pre-processing will be able to rank those images and then basically in the final stack include the good images more than the bad images, which should provide us with a better stack in the end. The fast batch pre-processing does not do that at all. And until recently, it wasn't even able to drizzle. Now it is able to drizzle, and this is what I'll be comparing today. And so based on this information, to me, the weights that you assign to subframes is very important, especially if you're imaging from a light polluted area. Because whenever I image from a city like Tokyo, which I'm in, then I can see that throughout the night, the number of stars that are detected in my images rises dramatically until the meridian and then decreases again. And this is simply purely because of the amount of light pollution that there is, much more the closer you get to the horizon. And so with weights, we avoid the negative effects of that. But that is mostly true for broadband imaging. It's probably less true for narrowband imaging, where we are filtering out a lot of the light pollution in the first place. And so I came into this project thinking, okay, for narrowband, fast batch pre-processing and weighted batch pre-processing will be very close to one another in terms of image quality. For broadband, we'll see more of a difference. And that does, if we see this trend, it indicates that if you're in a not very light polluted area, something like Bortle 4, Bortle 5 or better than that, maybe you don't need to use weighted batch pre-processing. So let's see. I have on my screen images of the North America Nebula. So this was taken with dual band narrowband filters with an IMX571 sensor, and there were 117 frames that got stacked basically. And on the left hand side I have the result of fast batch pre-processing together with the stats, how long it took to run. And then on the right hand side I have the result of the weighted batch pre-processing together with the times that it took. And if we look between the two, you can see that fast batch pre-processing has much fewer steps than the weighted batch pre-processing. You can see that I basically left the defaults with the weighted batch pre-processing. In particular, we do, of course, the measurements of the frames. We do local normalization, which takes a lot of time. We do the integration and then the drizzle integration. On the other hand, the fast batch pre-processing only does basically fast integration and drizzling, and that's basically it. So there's a large difference there. In terms of time taken, we see that the weighted batch pre-processing took roughly 1.5 hours versus the fast batch pre-processing took 23 minutes. So there is indeed a fairly large difference. That said, most of the time myself, I disable local normalization because I don't see it giving me such a huge advantage. I don't see a large difference, and that gains me 30 minutes. In which case, we're closer to 23 minutes versus 1 hour and 6 minutes, which is a bit closer in terms of time spent, especially since it is time spent, your PC is doing stuff. It's not like you have to stare at it. You can do something else in the meantime. By the way, I wasn't using a very powerful PC for this. It's actually this little tiny handheld PC that has done this stacking of 120 frames. It's actually the PC that I'm currently using to show you those PixInsight results. So we can indeed see a difference in the time spent. What about the quality? Remember my assumption, because narrowband imaging, our imaging from non-light polluted areas, is much less affected throughout the night by light pollution being worse near the horizon, I was expecting to see both having the same results. So let's have a quick look. So we can zoom into, let's say, the very center of that dark nebula here, and let's see what it looks like on the other image. And it looks very, very similar, but something that I noticed, and this is due to the fact that I personally don't take dark frames because I rely on the stacking and especially the rejection algorithm during the stacking to remove any hot pixels that I might have when combined with dithering. And this seems to rear its ugly head. You can see around here, there's a little red dot, like here it is. Whereas on the weighted batch pre-processing, I don't have that. So that gives me my first lesson. If you're going to use fast batch pre-processing, you better have dark frames are a good way of correcting for your hot pixels. I'll show you how it looks like on the Pleiades broadband later on, and you'll see, even with something like Cosmetic Correction, it's not perfect. However, besides that, it looks extremely similar. And by the way, these images, they're basically the raw image with just a screen transfer function stretched applied to them. I can put them on top of one another and switch between the two. So this is weighted batch pre-processing, fast batch pre-processing. I don't see, besides those hot pixels, I basically don't see any difference. Kind of what I was expecting. You can see, by the way, which file I'm using this name on the left. If it's WBPP, it is a weighted batch pre-processing. If it's the fast batch pre-processing, it will be FBPP. And yeah, I don't see a lot of difference. Let's look at some other areas in the image. So now we're going to switch between the two frames. This is fast batch pre-processing and weighted batch pre-processing. Yeah, we switch between the two. I honestly don't see any difference between the two images. Okay, so we can see it's very, very close. Let's have a look at the Pelican Nebula, which is here. And again, I am going to go in between the frames. And yeah, I don't see much of a difference. I mean, if I didn't tell you that we were going in between frames, you might not even notice that I am switching between frames right now. Listen to my keyboard to know when I'm doing the switch. So there it is for narrowband. Assuming you take darks or you have a way to take care of those annoying little hot pixels, which were where were they? Yes, around here. Then fast batch pre-processing seems to work very well. And in terms of time, it does save like around 36 minutes for 120 frames, which is not bad at all. So what about broadband imaging from a light polluted city like here in Tokyo? Let's have a look at how it looks on the Pleiades. By the way, before you do that, if you ever wonder how the stacking algorithms work and what parameters to put in all of this stacking, what the weights mean, etc., and you're getting confused, there's a great way to get back into math, physics, science, etc., and that is to use today's video sponsor, Brilliant.org. Brilliant is where you learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in math, data analysis, programming, and AI. And there are new lessons that are added all the time. And I personally use Brilliant almost every day because it makes learning a lot of fun, and it also makes it very effective to learn. Because instead of you just passively watching a video, for instance, you actually have to hands-on, because the lessons are organized a bit like problems themselves. Everything is interactive. You have to think to go through the lesson, and it's like doing your homework in real time while you are taking the lesson. It's super effective. So you're not just like learning by heart, you're building real knowledge on specific topics while becoming a better thinker at the same time. And so that way you can analyze PixInsight much more. And at the same time, because the lessons can be like short, bite-size, and fun, it really makes it easy to set them up as a daily learning habit instead of doom scrolling on social media. Of course, I was referring right now like weighted batch pre-processing, etc. This is related a lot to statistics and probability. And Brilliant happens to have great courses on that. I've taken some of them. They use real-world data and is great for learners of any level to start or continue learning. For me, I was continuing learning, and I actually learned new stuff during those courses. It's really a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it. So if that sounds fun to you and you want to try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, you can visit brilliant.org/quivlazygeek or simply click on the link in the description. And then you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Okay, and now we are ready to go back to the broadband stuff with the Pleiades taken from Tokyo. So for the Pleiades, I had 756 frames, each 20 seconds long, that I took over one night, I believe. And because it is broadband, it is in Tokyo, I had the number of stars curve that is expected with a lot of light pollution near the horizon. And that's where I expect the weighted batch pre-processing to have more of a difference. Now, one of the things I noticed when I started stacking with the default options of the weighted batch pre-processing, when it came to the integration step, when it actually makes the mathematical operations to merge all of the frames together, I looked at the progress and it looked like it was going to take between like 30 and 40 hours to do the stacking. And this is because of the pixel rejection algorithm that PixInsight defaults to. We can change that to lower that time to something like an hour, and it's basically the same results. So that's what I did, because I don't want to spend 30 hours waiting for a stack to complete. And I think the fact that PixInsight defaults to that very time-consuming rejection algorithm is the reason why so many people are really annoyed at the weighted batch pre-processing and how long it takes. And I think PixInsight should consider changing that. So to show you how to do that, when you're in the weighted batch pre-processing, if you go to your Lights tab, you have the integration parameters. And under there, you have the rejection algorithm. If you leave it to auto, it will go to something called generalized extreme studentized deviate when it has a lot of frames. I'm not sure what the threshold is, but that's what it does. Well, simply change it from auto to Winsorized Sigma clipping, leave the default options, you'll get basically the same result. So yeah, that's a weird thing about the weighted batch pre-processing. And so in this case, that's what I did. So these are the results. On the left-hand side, just like before, we have the fast batch pre-processing. On the right-hand side, we have the weighted batch pre-processing. And underneath, we have the stats. I forgot to take a screenshot of the stats after the weighted batch pre-processing, so I only have the total time that it took, but I can say that the local normalization took 56 minutes because I remember seeing that. So you can see the total time, including the drizzling, for the fast batch preprocessor to do the stacking was 57 minutes, and the total time for the weighted batch preprocessing was 2 hours and 46 minutes, so 1 hour 50 minutes more. Although if you remove local normalization, which is one of those other options you can go in and under these settings, you just uncheck local normalization, you would have saved roughly 1 hour. In which case the gap between the two becomes only 1 hour, from 1 hour on the left to 2 hours on the right. So anyway, looking at the Pleiades, one of the things on the left, fast batch pre-processing, what do we notice immediately? Yes, this constellation of hot pixels. And actually, the more you look through the image, you can see there's a constellation here, there's a constellation there, there's a constellation here, a bit less visible, there's a green constellation there, another green constellation there. It is the constellation of hot pixels across the image. And so that's because I personally do not take dark frames. So to avoid that, you will need to take dark frames or do proper cosmetic correction. That said, I tried to do cosmetic correction manually and then stack again, and that adds like 40 minutes to the process. So maybe not worth it. And then if you look at the results, this is without any background extraction or anything. But if I go deep, you can see there are still echoes of those hot pixels constellations. They're not completely removed. They're still there a little bit. So yeah, in this case, we're having issues. Again, fast batch pre-processing only if you have dark frames or you're able to do some good cosmetic correction on your images. Now, those two images, again, it is just a screen transfer function applied, also spectrophotometric color calibration, and I did an automated dynamic background extraction on both of them because otherwise it was very much like this, lost in the smog, and it's very difficult to tell any difference between the two frames. And this here is what we are getting. We already noticed the constellations. Another thing we notice is this streak here that I believe came from a geosynchronous satellite. You can see that the pixel rejection actually managed to get rid of most of it in the weighted batch pre-processing, but not completely. That said, it's still much, much better than on the fast batch pre-processing that doesn't have such robust rejection algorithms. And let's zoom into the image, see the differences, like apparent differences between fast batch pre-processing and weighted batch pre-processing. And to me, something that is very striking, I don't know if it's visible to you guys, but the contrast between the light areas and the darker areas is much stronger on the weighted batch pre-processing on the right. Let me put the image on top of one another and switch between the two. This is fast batch pre-processing, weighted batch pre-processing. Fast, weighted, fast, weighted. And if you don't know any better, the fast batch pre-processing might look better because it's brighter, but actually is because it has less contrast than the weighted batch pre-processing. This is because it was more lost in light pollution throughout the night compared to the weighted batch pre-processing that allocated lower weights to frames more affected by light pollution. So this is something that doesn't surprise me. Now we see a large difference between the two images. And regardless of where I look in the image, let's look at this area there. This is fast batch pre-processing. This is weighted batch pre-processing. The difference is quite striking between the two. More contrast by far for weighted batch pre-processing compared to fast batch pre-processing, for which the image looks mushier, I would say, in general. And if we go to the background, again, we see something similar. This is nebulosity that is fading into the background. Right now we are looking at weighted batch pre-processing, and now fast batch pre-processing, and you can see the contrast between nebulosity and background is less pronounced. Weighted, fast. Weighted, fast. Okay, so we see a large difference. And then I was wondering, okay, but effectively, in terms of processing, how does it affect us? So I did a quick blur exterminator, noise exterminator, stretch, and then some curves applied to both images to look at what the actual differences would be between the two processed images and which one would be more fun to process. And so this is basically the result. On the left, again, we have the fast batch pre-processing. On the right, we have the weighted batch pre-processing, processed, for a few minutes to the best of my ability. And I can say subjectively, it was much more pleasant to work with the weighted batch pre-processing image, especially when I was doing the curves transformation. It was much easier for me to put contrast between the nebulosity and the background than it was with the fast batch pre-processing. I had to adjust the curves in the fast batch pre-processing to be a bit more aggressive in basically cutting out the dark point of the histogram. And I feel like even at a distance like that, the weighted batch pre-processing image is better. There are fewer gradients in the background, like there's this yellowish gradient here and red yellow here and there as well and there, that are not at all visible in the fast batch, in the weighted batch pre-processing, because it was able to reject the frames with more light pollution. If we zoom into one of the areas, we can see that despite my best effort, there is still a difference of contrast between weighted batch pre-processing and fast batch pre-processing. So this is weighted, fast, weighted, fast, and you can see the difference is very visible. And so that's where we are in terms of weighted batch pre-processing versus fast batch pre-processing. For me, unless you have a really good reason to use fast batch pre-processing, for instance, some kind of live stacking, or you want to quickly see the results of your image, I would always use the weighted batch pre-processing rather than the fast batch pre-processing. There simply isn't enough of a time advantage for the fast version compared to the weighted version with better parameters than the default ones. If this conclusion and the work that I did in this video is worth a like, remember to go down below, click on that like button, it takes a second, it really helps the channel out. Let me know what you think of fast batch pre-processing versus weighted batch pre-processing down in the comments. I love to see all of your comments and reading them, answering them. It's always a lot of fun, always a lot of knowledge sharing. I love it. And if you're new to the channel and you like this kind of analysis, tutorials, gear review, etc., everything astrophotography, you may consider subscribing using that subscribe button. Click on that bell icon as well. And if you want to support the channel even more at no cost to you and you're planning on buying anything from Amazon, Agena, Highpoint, First Light Optics, etc., if you use one of the links that I have down in the description, it will help me out, again, at no cost to you. If you want to sponsor the channel more directly, you can join my channel as a member. That's the join button next to the subscribe button. Or you can join my Patreon, and the link is down in the description. Some of my Patreon ranks have access to my videos early and without ads. With that, thank you as always so much for watching. I hope you learned something. Don't forget, whenever you can, to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.